thank you very much for coming. We want to, first of all, thank Walters for sponsoring this event. They've been sponsoring it for the last several years, and we're very, very grateful for their generous support. And Ken Schindler, if he's here, would like to thank you. Want to stand up? And thanks very much, everyone. Yeah. If you have cell phones, please silence them, or if you have to make a call or receive a call, please take it outside in the hall, and we really appreciate it. It's now my extreme pleasure to welcome the internationally celebrated designer Alexandra Champalimaud, whose work includes some of the most famous properties in the world, the Dorchester, the Carlisle, the Bel Air, the Pierre, and currently the Waldorf Astoria. There are also restaurants and spas and product lines, which you'll be hearing more about as we go on this afternoon. I've known her for a while. I know she is charming, intelligent, highly opinionated, everything you want in an interview subject, so the bar is very high. And incidentally, she's the first woman to grace our stage in this one-on-one format. So welcome, Alexandra.
I like that.
We can discuss why later. But let's begin with your background and how you became a designer, what your early life was like, where you grew up, how you got to New York from your birthplace.
I don't want to make it too long a story, but I am Portuguese and English. I grew up in Portugal. I had an amazing childhood, really interesting, beautiful place, as is Portugal, as is Lisbon. It informed a lot of the aesthetic that I still borrow on today and inspires me. So very much a classical environment to my upbringing. But of course, Europe isn't as big as America, so you can get around a little bit more. So I actually was at school in England, eventually in Switzerland, and so you travel quite a bit by car in those days, much more than by plane. And she stopped at incredible sites and places, and along the way stayed in wonderful hotels and small inns, and all of this informed what would be the hospitality work that I do today. It's been after Europe. I actually was in Montreal for many years because there was a revolution in my country in 1975, and I was extremely young and had a little child. But actually, we left, my husband and I, we went to Montreal, which became my second home for about 15 years, actually 17. And I had another son who was born there. And I did start what was called the North American experience, which means that all that you know, you swallow, put in a drawer, because now you've come to a new place, and you listen, and you observe, and you assimilate, and you become, hopefully, able to negotiate your world in this country. That was in Canada. Eventually, about 10 years ago, having lived in Quebec for many years, I actually entered a couple of competitions and won both of them to do work in New York and in Boston. 2 hotels, the Drake and the Swiss Hotel in Boston, years ago. And in winning those 2, that provided an opportunity for me to come to the United States. So it was a very slow entry, but then I started getting wonderful work in this country. The Algonquin was one of the first ones that I did, that incredible, wonderful landmark hotel, which you see there. And after that, I just started doing work pretty much everywhere. South America, India, Northern India, Pakistan, Europe, and a lot in this country, which has been amazing.
Can we go back just a bit and just discuss, as a child, were you creative? Was your family creative? How did you know that those those seeds were going to blossom into something like what you're doing?
Well, I really never did, to be honest. I've always thought that I never thought of myself as creative, but I did love to draw, and I did love everything that was historical, and I loved design. I was interested, and aesthetics of all sorts really mattered a lot to me. And then, in fact, when I did graduate from school in England, I decided that I wanted to do interior design, and ended up having a very classical education in interior design and architecture and history of art, history of furniture in Lisbon, which is the city of my heart, and in an amazingly interesting museum and sort of workshop which does 18th century reproduction work, furniture, gold leafing, bookbinding, amazing, unique craftsmanship, which was very inspirational to me. And then I simply loved my first job, which I got with my from school with, in fact, my professor was a hotel, but so I was working with him, and I found though that all of that, the size of my career I never thought I'd come to, but the sense that I had a gift in changing things and making them beautiful, everything from flower arranging to anything that would change the environment of a house or a place or any space. It seemed very natural to me. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that interior design was a career when I was being brought up. So you just fell into it, and that's what I did.
Was it a time when there was was it a time when there was really no hospitality industry per se?
Honestly, in this country, there probably was the beginnings of it. I think Holiday Inns were happening, and you know there was, but in Europe, there was no such thing as the hospitality industry. There were independent hotels that belonged to wonderful characters and old families, and each one of them had a tremendous personality, and it was part of what I lived through was the discovery of all of those places. And so I think my work has today still is informed by that sort of interesting, the respect that I have for the origin of the idea, the origin of the character of the place. So in Europe, no, there wasn't an industry. Today there is an industry of which we are all happily a part. So.
Who were your mentors and or inspirations when you were starting out? Were there any specifically in interior design, or were there was it more painters and sculptors and?
Well, in my studies, my professor and two professors at school were amazingly brilliant and did incredibly interesting interiors and rather theatrical but very colorful, and they were great actually. And that inspired me to kick in, and I could move forward with the next steps of what would be my career, but I didn't know it really. And the others were the usual culprits that I think so many of us fall back on. Classicists, Jean-Michel Franc, Ruhlmann, these people, these wonderful architects of design of the Deco period in Europe. I found them to be of exquisite designs, producing designs of exquisite proportion and modern in so many ways still. And so I borrowed from a lot of that. The other were the menuisiers, the craftsmen who from the 18th century. because that's where it all began, actually. People like Jean-Michel Franc was, in fact, inspired. He himself was inspired in the 18th century. All his work is derived from that. It's just simpler. So I followed those same paths and to be where I am today.
Well, jumping to today, you mentioned earlier to me that, and this is speaking of mentors, you have become very interested in mentoring yourself and in education, and even suggested that maybe education would be in your future someday as an educator. Why do you think that's important, and why do you think it's needed?
I have been very fortunate, and I have started my business twice, once in Montreal and then again in New York. And I have offices full of, today I have an office full of wonderful, wonderful people and designers who are extremely creative. But I have noticed, and I think it's essential, it's rather like a very good education that we all pay a lot of money to get. I think an education needs to be, obviously, what is a good education? It needs to be very well grounded in not only giving you the tools that are given to you shouldn't just be for design, the contemporary modern tools of how to use a CAD for instance, or how to do a detail for a construction site. Or I think that those are tools that, yes, we need to know, but what people, I think, are missing when I see them come to the table for an interview is, in fact, an informed background on what is history of art, of furniture, the periods in history, why it is essential, because you make references in contemporary design today, you make references to different periods along the way from different countries. There's a different aesthetic from different countries. And it's a respect also because the world has become small and smaller and smaller. And we need, as designers, we're international ambassadors for design. We need to feel comfortable in all these different countries. We need to be able to go and work there and bring back work to this country, which is what I do a bit of. And so what I'm saying, oops, can you hear me properly? Oh, good. I hope it's worth it. Anyway, so to me, it's essential that there should be a more well-rounded education at the sort of classic level for interior designers. And schools don't do that in this country very readily. And so that's something I would like to help contribute or change in some way.
How do you see that happening?
Well, I'd like to get involved with a school or university.
Yeah.
And so I do think that is something I'll be doing in my next decade, hopefully.
Wonderful. Well, the love of history, you clearly adore history, are immersed in history in many ways. You do a lot of different projects, but you also do a great deal of historic renovation. Do you prefer that to a new project, or do they just have both different satisfactions? Actually,
they both have enormous satisfaction. To me, what I like is problem solving. I like to take a bunch of facts, and I like to pay attention to those facts, of which there are many parts. It's not just the style of the design. It's the reason why there is design in the first place. What is the requirement? What is this place or hotel about? What do the owners want? What do the guests expect? And all of those things is what, in fact, to then create the design is what makes me very happy. The fact that I've done a lot of renovations and some restoration, but renovation projects, is because I happen to know, I wouldn't say a fair amount, because I tend to think that the more I know, the more I don't know, in fact, in life. But I have enough information to be able to understand where a renovation is situated, how it should be addressed, and with what tools, and there isn't a project that I don't research, however, whether it be contemporary or already existing in a renovation. Because a contemporary one or a new build it has its DNA already before you even touch it. It's presented to you, and you need to respect all of that and then make magic. It applies both ways, but the advantage of the tool I have, and that's where the education bit comes in, is just the historic side.
Is there a, I know each property is individual, separate, but is there a common thread that makes blending the past and the present work?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And that's about us today in the room, what it is that we all require and want to visit and live in and stay. What do we aspire to? I don't think hotels have to be a home away from home, by the way. I mean, they should be. People should move in forever, in fact. But they're not exactly what we have at home. In fact, we go there to slightly fantasize, I hope. But there is always so what is common between the two is the product in the end has the same level of utility, comfort, it's user-friendly, it's durable, it's got great scale, great proportion, it's inviting, it's refreshing, it's uplifting. These are all real words that I truly employ, and they guide me in my work. And it makes it, and that happens for both types of projects. So, because it's the end result, and you want people, we're talking about hotels, which is basically inhabited by people that we want to come and stay and keep staying and keep enjoying and returning and spend their money and have a great time and feel amazing after they leave. So the experience has to be fantastic, and that's what we design. We have to capture that. It's a challenge, but so you have to put yourself in other people's shoes all the time.
In that regard, what has been the most challenging project, would you say, that you've done?
Putting myself in other people's shoes? I'm not sure.
Or the most rewarding? From what you began with to what you ended up with?